ambitious is probably a better word, environmental agenda. They are talking a lot about single-use plastic, so that will take up some time as well. Appropriations Chair Tim Ormsby has recently been talking about the need for investments in housing and rental assistance. And then we'll continue our conversation about the need for broadband connectivity to make sure that all of our students have access to high-speed broadband and our teachers in their homes as well. The budget outlook is great. So since the last time the legislature adjourned, the revenue forecast has added almost $2 billion to what they anticipate they'll be able to spend next session. The March 2021 reserves were 1.2 billion and we're higher than that now. So the state budget's in very good shape, but there are a lot of requests and needs from policy sectors, from K-12 to the healthcare sector to housing advocates. Every day Olympia is full of people asking for some very worthy requests. So, but of course, education is the paramount duty of the state. So our elected superintendent, Superintendent Rakedahl, has released his decision package. The decision package is his request of Governor Inslee for what should be prioritized for K-12 in the governor's budget. He's focusing on a request around school nurses. He is proposing that this be phased in over 3 years, and it's just a little over 25 million for the whole state to increase school nurses. So that seems to be getting a lot of good early support, and I think we will likely see that in Governor Inslee's budget. He has some other requests that are smaller. For example, the technology at OSPI is antiquated, and to send out all those dollars to our schools, they need to update their system. So we'll see which of those budget requests actually make it in Governor Inslee's budget. So this is the school staffing allocations, the 2019 ratios versus what Citizens passed in Initiative 1351 around staffing level. So you can see we're focused on school nurses, or Superintendent Rakedahl is, and then I anticipate that he will start to work on increases in all those staffing levels year after year. So just one piece at a time. And here are the numbers that he is seeking. I said it was just about 25 million. In the first year, it's 26 million and then goes up from there. So I'm hoping that we will be successful in that ask. Governor Inslee will release his budget by December 21, and then the legislature can take Governor Inslee's budget and they can accept his proposal or they can pass their own. Usually we see some of the governor's requests show up in the final operating budget, but sometimes legislators have a mind of their own, so we'll see what they do. But it's a good first look at priorities when we see Governor Inslee's budget. It's still early and we're waiting for WASDA and WASA and all of our partner organizations, the principals, the school superintendents, your colleagues, other school board members will be setting their legislative priorities, and we're still gathering what those priorities are, but these are what I am hearing my colleagues speak about: incremental updates in the prototypical model, updating the STARS transportation formula. I'm very proud here, Evergreen Public Schools, to have taken a leadership role on that. We're working with Representative Stonier as a prime sponsor when we'll be introducing that bill, or she'll be introducing that on our behalf, to update that STARS formula so that it's more transparent, so that there's adequate funding for all kids, and that the transportation system is funded more appropriately and realistically. The school district priorities, we're also continuing to talk about special education funding, COVID recovery funds, and I put regionalization up there because it is really important for Evergreen Public Schools and for Vancouver. I do not anticipate that will be an issue taken up in this short session, but it is certainly on legislators' mind and to-do list for 2023. OSPI has a work group that will look at the regionalization formula and attempt to propose something that is a bit more equitable than we see right now. The School Funding Coalition are education groups that we all affectionately call the ABC groups, or because of all the letters: WASDA, WASA, AWSP, and we are all focused in coalition together to advocate for updating staffing ratios in the prototypical school model, and that's the slide that I showed you earlier. So I meet with my colleagues, we work on talking points and support you in advocating in front of the legislature for that prototypical school funding model update. And then finally, as the ESD 112 has not yet set regional priorities, but this is the list that our superintendents were looking at. And I believe that WASDA, the school directors, you have the Legislative Assembly, is it this weekend, I think?
Friday and Saturday.
Friday and Saturday. And so I'll be listening to that and really anxiously awaiting what priorities that you and your colleagues set that we will then all support and support you in advancing. I don't think there's anything on this list that I have not already mentioned or that would be new to you. Special education, close opportunity gaps and advancing equity, supporting capital facilities. And then I, again, am leaving regionalization there because it's so important. So with that, thank you so much for your time. And if you have any comments or anything that you'd like me to carry to the legislature, I can do that. But otherwise, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Melissa. I really appreciate the work that you do for us up there, because we can't all be up there, but it's nice to know we have somebody who represents us and has a voice.
Thank you.
One of the questions I have is there any conversation going on regarding the COVID mandates? As we see what's going on in other states, do we see any of that kind of tracking for here? What are we looking at?
Well, I know that there are lots of conversations happening internally in Governor Inslee's office. Superintendent Rakedahl is involved in those conversations with Department of Health. But we generally wait and see what it is that the Department of Health is recommending, and then what comes by way of proclamation through Governor Inslee's office. So lots of conversation, but I don't anticipate any changes anytime soon. Superintendent Merlino, you've been in, am I answering that correctly?
What's that?
Do you agree? Is that your understanding?
I mean, I think we ask every week of our local leaders, and then superintendents are always asking Superintendent Reichdahl and trying to weigh in and provide input. But I don't, we generally find out when there's going to be an announcement from the, we get an announcement that the governor's going to have a press conference this afternoon and there's school people participating. So we don't, I think we advocate all the time, but we don't really have a good sense of until it happens. So I agree with what you're saying.
We work to communicate to the governor's office and to OSPI quite often what's happening here on the ground, the decisions that you as board directors are making to help inform their decisions.
Well, the challenge is that we're not really making those decisions, because that's, it's at the state level and we're just required to comply with the mandates. I'm not making a statement one way or the other whether I agree with them or not. I'm just saying that's our situation. Do we see anything coming that might go beyond the mask and distancing mandates, such as the vaccination, any more vaccination mandates? We've already got it for our staff.
No, not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
In the last, I don't know, it's last week that Superintendent Reichdahl, or I think he was just with the Clark County districts last Monday, and he didn't anticipate any this school year around vaccinations.
Okay.
I'll ask my question because probably Rob has several. So, so in the beginning you mentioned, and I appreciate that overview of everything that's happening in the state and some of the things that they're going to be prioritizing around, because I feel like that's something that for education we always have to try to find our way in, because there's so many priorities across the state, even more so now that we're in this COVID pandemic. What do you think the appetite is for them for listening to education and getting some of the things that we've been working on for the last several years in there?
Yeah, I will tell you, there's always a little bit of grumbling because the state portion of the budget that goes to K-12 is over 50%, but generally they come back around, and when there are authentic and needs that we can present to them supported by data, the legislature has been pretty responsive. I was talking to Superintendent Merlino earlier about enrollment decline and perhaps an ask around holding districts harmless, because we really just anticipated these numbers to drop for 1 year, and we didn't anticipate the Delta variant. So now enrollment is still down, but we need to continue to retain high-quality teachers, and we know that the workforce numbers are down. So I think that the legislature will need to come around and fund some of those things. So I would say a little bit of grumbling, but then
But willing to
resignation to
listen.
do the right thing. And we will remind them early and often.
As one should.
Do you think that, I want to tag on to what Julie's talking about, that in light of what's happened with the pandemic and just all the issues that have kind of hit all the communities, that we saw where a lot of holes were, not just here in Evergreen, but across the state as it pertained to Wi-Fi access, to childcare issues that right now are just really untenable for our parents and our families. Do you think that changed the flavor of things a little bit, because the holes became glaring throughout the pandemic on the inequities throughout the state? So I'm just curious if that seems to have changed the kind of the tenor of the conversation.
I do think that it's helped prioritize. It really has shone a light on places where there are inequities, particularly around broadband, and not just for kids, but some teachers don't have great access to broadband. And I also think in early learning and childcare, the legislature, there are work groups happening all interim to look more carefully at those. Housing and rental assistance with affordable housing. I think it has helped legislators prioritize what are the most dire needs. And I know that it weighs heavily on them. I had the opportunity to sit down with Chair Ormsby a couple of weeks ago, and he just saying, we're like a family. We sit down and we have to prioritize our budget. And yes, an extra $2 billion sounds like a lot of money, but just to pay for the enrollment hold harmless across the state is about $400 million. Well, pretty soon $400 million and $200 million starts to really add up. And the needs in K-12 are very, very expensive. So they are trying to balance a budget just like we all do.
I wonder if I think about this quite a bit, is whether or not there are initiatives in Health and Human Services, I'm using the federal term, DSHS, area that could be exponentiated by positioning those services close to service recipients, such as in schools, whether or not conversations happen along those lines. It's just like you can help education by stabilizing a family kind of arguments. What do you see? Is there thinking along those lines?
Yes, I think smart policymakers are having those conversations. I just on my drive down was talking to one of my colleagues about a Department of Health decision package, and I'm so focused on OSPI and K-12, and she was telling me, did you see the Department of Health is prioritizing the need for school-based health clinics so that we can partner with Department of Health more on behavioral and mental health support. So where we can very much be in our silo. The pandemic is causing us to lift up our head and look at other social service supports outside of just K-12. It seems to be happening in the healthcare sector and mental and behavioral health. We need to do a better job, but I do think those conversations are happening.
Go in a different direction, or did you get your?
Can
I
you
wanted
speak
to.
into your mic? Oh, better. There you go.
I can try to bring this a little
There
closer.
you go.
Is that better?
Thank you.
Thank you. With respect to identifying costs and things, I was in an email conversation with Drew Hansen about his PUD bill. And if you recall, we passed a resolution calling on the city or the county, I can't remember which entity, to do a feasibility study about municipal internet or public utility internet and so forth. He didn't know about that action, and so I'm curious to see if there's ways. I know he's very excited, and I know there are partisans here. We're very excited with Drew Hansen and his bill, to connect him with the right leaders here, so that he can sort of cross-pollinate the ideas.
In the Vancouver area, there's a
Right.
local initiative that Representative Hansen was not aware of.
Yeah, I think, wasn't it the city who'd asked us to
The city did
resolve
ask
support
us-
for the feasibility study?
Yeah, they did that it was a while ago, right?
Yeah,
They asked all the districts in Clark County, I think, to submit that.
and I imagine the study is going on or something, but I don't know. We would like a connection with leaders here around that subject.
That's wonderful. I mean, I do think elected to elected, you are, when you're able to have those conversation as elected leaders in this area with our state elected leaders, that's helpful. The Department of Commerce has a very robust Office of Broadband that is engaged and has received federal dollars and has very ambitious plans. I know Representative Hansen and also Senator Wellman, who's the K-12 education chair, very engaged on those issues. But
Very
yeah,
data oriented too.
I'm sorry?
It's fascinating to listen to her. She's very data oriented.
She is very data, oriented, and there's been some difference of opinion and approach between the House and the Senate, and I think that those are good, robust conversations that drive good public policy, I hope. But I was not aware of that, and it sounds like you've already connected with Chair Hansen, but I can help with that if that's needed at all.
I left him with some names and a copy of our resolution. I think if he were to have an introduction or know whom to approach to further these ideas, that he would really appreciate it.
Yeah,
That's
that's,
the sense that I got from that email conversation. Talking about bill costing, I see a lot of cost estimates for education bills where the sentence in all the costing is, there is no mechanism for local, to determine local costs. What should we be doing to make sure that knowledge of the cost impact locally is included in the conversations about a lot of the mandates and requirements that come through?
so are you speaking about fiscal notes attached to
notes,
the
yes.
bill? So every time there is a bill or a proposal that's advanced, every agency puts a price tag for how much this will cost the agency to pass. Usually those policies are sent out to a select group of fiscal officers in districts, and there are representatives from across the state. So that's our opportunity to have a local cost. Sometimes the fiscal note is introduced before that data is actually into the system, and it might take a little bit to catch up. So you might be seeing an early version. If something is passed without a local cost estimate, that's a problem. And we should be watching bills that we have concern about costs early in the process. So we, at Evergreen Public Schools, we keep a list of every bill that's been introduced. And then as they they move forward, we look more carefully at costs, and we can flag fiscal notes that don't have appropriate cost there.
What's the best way to bring that data to the attention of legislators? Is that just a meeting you ask for, or is?
It would be likely through OSPI, through their chief financial officer that would be responsible for the fiscal note. If you see something that is not appropriately priced, you could bring it to Superintendent Merlino's attention, and we can work with OSPI to flag that for them.
Okay.
Something we have been talking to lawmakers about is unfunded mandates, because there are lots of good ideas, but if they don't want to pay for it, they can't just say you pay for it.
We have to talk about.
So
that.
we are often testifying about that concern.
Okay,
And we're often saying, we think this is a really good idea, but if you don't pay for it, the school budget has other priorities as well.
Sounds like you're really well connected, of course, with the STARS bill. I guess I just wanted to share When we took that position through the legislative committee at WASDA, there was no controversy. It was just approved as we wrote it. And the General Assembly, I anticipate the same thing. So I'm hoping, very confidently.
Thank you for your leadership on that. We're counting on you to get it through the,
I'm hoping very confidently that it'll be an uncontroversial position of the association.
thank you so much for doing that. Superintendent Merlino and I were also able to work with WASA, and we do have that on their ledge agenda as well. So
That is,
I'm going to knock on wood that we have success with that bill.
that is one of the bills that I'm suspicious will end up with an OSPI, no mechanism kind of fiscal note about the local costs. And so try to be watchful of that.
Yeah.
Do you need stories about what's happening around here for the police reform work?
When those bills are introduced, we may. At this point, through the ESD, we've been working on training for SROs, focusing on restorative justice practices, which is, I think the work is exciting and good and helps train those SROs so they can function well in a school environment. But when those bills come up, I know there'll be opportunity for stories through WASDA and through the district.
How can we get students into the hearing room?
How do we?
How can we? Yeah.
How can we? I feel like we've been doing a good job. I know that's a priority for WASDA. And so I think we see students pretty regularly.
Do you have any questions for Melissa?
No, but thank you for coming and sharing tonight.
Going down, Melissa.
Yes, good to
Appreciate it.
see you. Thank
Thanks
you
for
so much.
making
Thank
that trek down here,
Yes, absolutely.
especially on a blustery day. Okay. Next up, we have the board's consent agenda. I would like to ask for a motion to adopt the board consent agenda.
I move to approve the board consent agenda.
Second.
And I would like to have a motion to go into executive session to review the performance of a public employee.
Should we take a vote on the consent agenda first? Should we take a vote on the consent agenda first?
Yes, we can. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay. Now could we have a motion to go into an executive session to review the performance of a public employee?
So moved.
Second.
The executive session will last 10 minutes. We will go into executive session, be back in 10 minutes. It's now 6:22. We will reconvene the meeting. Want to make a motion? Can do it? No. I will move that the board accept the recommendation of the superintendent to separate employment of the employees listed on the consent agenda under non-disciplinary dismissal for the reasons provided by the superintendent, and that the chief operations officer provide appropriate written notice to the employees listed on the consent agenda under non-disciplinary dismissal of the board's action.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Now I'll ask for a motion to adopt the superintendent consent agenda. Move to adopt the superintendent's consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Now we have matters reserved for board action. We will now open the public hearing to receive written and verbal comments regarding the justification for final acquisition, including by condemnation of the real property improvements and any additional interest in property located at the northeast quadrant of Southeast 176th Avenue and Southeast 29th Street in Vancouver at the former Hewlett-Packard SEH campus. I'd like to call on Superintendent Merlino for a briefing on the proposed action.
Thank you. In light of a fast-growing community, lack of suitable parcels for schools, and high demand for real estate, the district has determined that acquisition of the property you mentioned is necessary now to provide an appropriate site for the future construction of a new school. The district's representatives made efforts to negotiate with the buyer of the subject property under threat of condemnation, and the district has the power to acquire real property through eminent domain for the purpose of constructing a new school. The buyer and seller of the property were given notice during negotiations of the purchase and sale agreement that the district was entering into negotiations under threat of condemnation, and a purchase and sale agreement was executed by the parties under this threat. I recommend the board considers testimony in order to make a final determination to all interested parties.
Now, you call for public testimony to provide an opportunity for any interested party to submit written and verbal comments regarding the justification to purchase property under threat of condemnation. If anyone who wishes to give testimony to the board? Have anyone with their hands raised online? Okay, thank you. Okay, so considering we have not received any written or verbal comments of any kind, in the use of threat of condemnation to acquire land is in the best interest of the public. I call for a motion.
I move the board does hereby determine it is in the public's best interest to use the threat of condemnation to purchase property located at the northeast quadrant of Southeast 176th Avenue and Southeast 29th Street in Vancouver.
Second.
I accept the motion. So are you going to require a vote of the board at this point? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Next up, we have the superintendent's report. Superintendent Merlino, what are your updates?
Thank you, President Bradford. I've got a few things I want to just kind of recap over the last couple of weeks, things that we're working on. I've had the opportunity to visit buildings. I've mentioned that the last few weeks. Just in the last couple of weeks, I was at Sunset, Mill Plain, Illahee, Hearthwood, Silver Star, Endeavor, and Harmony. And it's interesting, you hear the same kind of message, which is A, everyone is so pleased to have the students back in school, and B, that this is proven to be just a very challenging year, and one of the more challenging years that folks have had in quite some time, just because of all of the work that goes into bringing our kids back. And I think also some of the stamina of both the students and the staff from the perspective of being away for a period of time and then coming back. So really can't say enough about how much we appreciate, I appreciate the hard work that's going on. I think a second thing is pretty much every building, and we've kind of talked about it over the course of the last several weeks, is facing some sort of a staffing shortfall, whether it's a open position, whether it's subs. It's just a real extreme challenge that everyone is facing. We constantly are working to try to bring more applicants in, whether it's transportation, whether it's our special education program through the paras. But I think we meet weekly with Matt Hill, the Senior Director of Special Ed. We had some real positive momentum with getting the unfilled positions down to still a ridiculously high level of something like in the 90s in terms of unfilled positions. I think we're back over 100 right now. So it just gives an idea of how many folks were short and what impact that is obviously part of the reaction to the major struggle that's going on. I do think, though, that folks are starting to get into somewhat of a routine, starting to feel like they're getting more into a routine around the COVID contact tracing, the protocols that we face, and are starting to get more into the deeper instructional conversations. But I can't emphasize enough how much impact there is just throughout the system on the students, the adults. Just really, it's a challenge. And I think our leadership team this morning, we started talking about some strategies we might have to help provide some addition, just relief support. What can we do for our teaching staff in terms of the things that we're hearing? We talked about in our meetings, we always kind of identify a number of different areas that we have and rate them red, yellow, green. And just that whole staff morale, we're really having to make sure that we're doing everything we can to pay attention to that and try to support our folks in the buildings. The second thing I'll mention is we had a presentation, I think it was in August maybe, from Doug Green with the Skilled Trade Center at Evergreen High School. We continue working with them. Sue and Adam Cormack have been working on some cost updates, and Justin Birmingham, Roger Shepard, Danny Arancia, Bill Culver, who's the teacher at Evergreen, been talking about the way that class would be delivered and how many kids we think we can support in that program. Well over 100 a year, which is a huge thing for us. Just real excited. We continue to work on that project, and we'll continue to bring updates on it. We also met this morning. We've been meeting. One of the things that we talked about is trying to provide as many opportunities for students as we possibly can. Our facilities have been restricted in terms of evening activities, and as we get to this time of year and kids with the weather changing and the impact that has on our students and our community children get out and run, we are looking at and we're starting to communicate out this idea that we're going to open our facilities back up to things like the Y, things like the Hot Shots program, just programs. I think that we have kids in our system that end up having access through playing in clubs, and they can get into the gyms, maybe not in Evergreen, but they can find the gyms. If they've got the money, they can find their way in. There's a lot of our kids that don't have the ability to do that. And so I think it's very important for us to obviously follow whatever protocols we need to follow from the state, but open our facilities back up so that our kids can have access to opportunities that might not otherwise have. So we kind of started that conversation working with Vancouver, working with Battleground. I know Camas is already doing this, so likely this week we'll put some information out on that. As I've said, all 18 months, we meet every week with Dr. Melnick. COVID activity continues to have a slow decline. Those numbers, which were in the high 500s, maybe even over 600 per 100,000, are down either in the upper 300s or the low 400s. We continue to hope to see those numbers decline. But it's just kind of a slow decline in Clark County. But it is good to see that we're moving in the right direction. Last Thursday, we had another strategic plan meeting. Victoria and Julie participated in. Really grateful for the community members that are participating in that, our staff members that are participating in that, helping us work on that plan. And I guess I would just conclude by just saying, I'm just extremely grateful for all of the hard work that goes in on a daily basis from our kids being in school, but from our staff serving and supporting our students. So real appreciative of everyone that we have here bringing that effort every day. That's all.
Next, we have a department update from Teaching and Learning Equity Department update. Julie Tumulty is going to give an update to the board.
Hello. Hi, good evening. Thank you guys for having me again. A few weeks ago, Director Perkins asked about Canvas. And so I wanted to give an update. Let me just get a better angle here. I wanted to give you an update. Canvas is our learning management system that we bought in the spring. And we started with a trial with early adopters in the spring. And our goal is to have one learning management system that would go across our school system. As parents, what we found with COVID is parents access many different websites, pages, and families and students. And so one place that we could get everything in one spot. And Canvas is a pretty tried and true learning management system used all across the country by many school districts. So in our early adoption last year, we had some teachers trialing it. This year for secondary, we have 240 teachers trialing it and about 7,000 students on. So we're trying to figure out the bugs of how is it working, what's happening with it. And what we're finding so far is that students are finding there's a lot of really positive things with to-do lists and calendars and how things are organized. Our biggest school that's using it is Union, with almost all of their teachers up and running. And that's with some mixed results, is anytime we start something new, the professional development with COVID has been a little bit stunted. But on October 8th, when we had the statewide professional development day, we had 50 teachers opt in for some training on Canvas, which was great. We did some surveying of students and teachers, and what we found is that the students really like the calendar aspect because it takes all of their classes and puts it onto one calendar for them. As a district, we've used different calendar ideas and apps, and this does it right there for them. It keeps to-do lists all in one place. The content, like I mentioned earlier, is all, again, in one housing spot. And then the grades, you get easy access to grades. As a parent, my daughters are using it. So I get emails that say, this assignment's been graded. And as much as my daughter doesn't like it, I can then check and see how she did, like pretty quickly, versus just trying to update constantly. You get those automatic updates, which is really nice. And then teachers really like there's a pass back to Skyward. So it's less work of once they input the grades once into Canvas, it passes automatically through Skyward. So we're hearing a lot of positives with how that's going. And there's always worry about how a technology adoption might go. The teachers have said, one thing they need is just more training. They're using things in different places, whether it's a to-do list or an assignment. So there's some hiccups getting with that. We're working to get different modules to teachers, because once they add a course or a module to Canvas, you can use it across the district. So there's a lot of sharing that can happen with the content. We just have to have some time to build it. And then middle school teachers are going to start using it at second trimester. So we're looking to get them some training and moving into that starting second trimester. So far, it's about 16% of our secondary teachers, which Michelle Dick, who is our resident ed tech, says that is right on the curve of, and Diana's shaking her head, yes, that's the curve of early adopters and like we're on the right path. So I feel like so far it's going well and we should have more data by the end of the year. Your update.
That's a good update.
Julie?
Any questions?
Yeah, I do. What about our families that English is not their first language? How is
Mhm.
that being handled for Spanish-speaking Russians? You know, we have a number of languages spoken
Yeah.
in our district. So what's happening with that?
I will have to find out if it translates for the parents, like in the emails, if there's translation. I don't know about that. So I will ask that question. Specifically for like the family communication. Mhm.
And was, as we looked at this and are kind of implementing it, were we using our equity lens on this to make sure that it complies with what we are hoping to do for our families and everything?
Yes, for sure. And that was one of the things that was nice about, I mean, parts of it that were nice is that it sends information versus having to seek it out. Skyward, when you look for grades, has not been easy and we know doesn't translate. So I'll ask about the translation, but that at least if it's in their email, it might have the auto.
Set up so that families can get some training on how to, because we've got professional development for our teachers, but what about our
Yes.
parents?
We don't have any parent tutorials in the mix yet. I'm happy to pass that along also.
Good suggestion.
Yeah, thank you.
Have any questions, comments?
But I like your suggestions.
I'm aware of a Washington State East Side call, I think it's West Valley School District out there. Would like to
Speak into
see,
your mic.
oh,
There you go.
would like to see, is that loud enough now?
Yeah.
Thank you. Technology be offered kind of at the OSPI level or the state board level so that every district can get access to what we're beginning to provide for our students. Just in talking about that, I know the buzz is we've just experienced this pandemic and hey, let's all be sharing what we know and best practices and good curriculum and so forth. To that end, you know, I'm aware, I think that Vancouver also uses Canvas.
Yeah, they've used it for a number of years.
Is there a way to coordinate and be using the learning resources and the curricular resources between districts now that we have the same platform?
Yeah, Michelle has been, I know, working with them and learning some pitfalls and best practices. I don't know if you can share content across platforms.
They do have a
But
wealth of best practices, and that's good to hear too. Let me see.
you guys are giving me a long list to write down, so I'll keep
I
looking.
just wondered what was in motion.
Yeah.
We'll do what's best for our kids, of course. Do you see, you said it was a goal of universal adoption, and this first step is secondary. Do the primary grades have different frictions? They really liked Seesaw last year, was one of the points of feedback that we got.
So the goal for this spring is that elementary, we would have early adopters. So we would offer it up to elementary, specifically 3rd through 5th grade. And then next year would be a trial for all elementary so the early adopters, we can get basically some key people in building that would then be helping others throughout the buildings. Next year, we would have basically the trial year like we're doing in secondary. 324, 3rd through 5th would be up and running on Canvas.
Do curriculum providers say like, oh great, what's the name of the reading curriculum?
Qantas and Pinnell.
Yeah, Pontus and Fennell. Do they have compatibilities
So some of them do and some of them don't. Some of them upload right to the system and the systems talk to each other and some of them don't. So we just have to check each system and we haven't done that with elementary yet.
So 23, 24 for third through fifth, and
Mhm.
22, 23 for wider adoption.
For 6 through 12. So all 6 through 12 teachers next year should be using it.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Rachel, do you have any questions?
No questions.
Jen?
Right, thank
We
you.
appreciate the
Thanks,
Kelly.
update.
Really
We'll
appreciate
look forward to
that.
hearing about things to come. Okay. Next up is our focus on student results. Tonight, we will be discussing results policy R3 equity. This is second reading. I would like to reopen the discussion on the motion to adopt results policy R3 equity as approved at the first reading, and the renumbering of student safety to R4, social and emotional development to R5, and citizenship to R6. I'm going to call on Director Perkins, who has a motion.
So when we discussed this last time, we had some really specific feedback from some of the district leaders, and we carried the voice of that committee. And we were struggling with some of the words. I would like to move here that we defer voting on this motion to our next regularly scheduled board meeting on the 9th of November, recognizing that we have a workshop item to discuss this more informally later on today. So my motion is to defer.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. And let's see here, I'd like to reopen the discussion on the motion to adopt results policy R6. Citizenship is approved at the first reading. Again, Director Perkins has a motion.
Same reason, same motion. Move to defer until the 9th of November.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Now, the good news report. Craig Birnbach is going to come and give us the good news report. Thank you for being with us tonight, filling in for Gail.
Bear with me, my first time doing this. So the good news is, much of this good news I was there for, so I know it pretty well. We concentrated a lot, our district and us in community relations, on this week, this month, September 15th to October 15th was Hispanic Heritage Month, and we had a lot of great celebrations and events throughout the district. I do want to point out that Spanish Parent Liaison Adriana Garcia and Marion Elementary School's FCRC coordinator Luisa Turner did something all month long. On every Wednesday, they held virtual meetings with dozens of our families and students, and they celebrated food from the countries that they had connections with, books, music. I went to 2 of these. The first one, it was really about food and how food connects with people's lives, and they even had a family in Costa Rica that was connected to a family here in the district, making food from Costa Rica during the meeting, so that was really cool. And I was also lucky enough to be able to bring those tamales home in the pictures to my wife for her dinner, so it made me a hero, so I enjoyed that. In the last one that they met on the final Wednesday, they had a book, and I'm not going to say it in Spanish, but it was about 2 cousins, one that lived in America and one lived in Mexico, and how they connected and discussed their lives. So that was really cool to witness. Throughout our district, the schools also did things. Pioneer Elementary School, of course, one of our Spanish immersion schools, they had 19 countries that were connected to their families there, and they celebrated those all month long. Columbia Valley, Carrie MacArthur's a teacher there. Her students created some wonderful art to celebrate. And then a couple of our middle schools, I went over to Y East and their leadership group. They were making a selfie station, which I'd never seen made before, but it was really cool. They were using their hands to kind of then make into flags from different countries, and they placed these all on the big billboard in the hallway, and they also made flowers and an area for students to come and take pictures in front of the art that they created. Over at Frontier, the teacher librarian, Christina Lauricia, set up an interactive display in the library so students could come and pin the countries where they had connections to. And it was also surrounded by books that they could select to read on Hispanic heritage. Riverview Elementary School, last year they weren't ever able to do their walk and talk, so it was really nice to see them be able to do their walk and talk event. And this event is when staff members go out and meet students and families, and a lot of students that usually take the bus to school, they walk to school and they walk with staff members. I went out with Principal Elizabeth Brawley, which was good for my steps because it ended up being the furthest away from the school. So we walked almost 2 miles, but it was really cool. Families and students, and Principal Brawley was able to connect with a lot of the students, and it's a really cool bonding thing for the whole school community, and it didn't rain, so that was awesome. My favorite story that we're sharing here is Frontier Celebrity Frog. This is a video story. I hope people have time. There is an awesome science teacher, Mr. Solberg, and he and his students have created this outdoor area at Frontier. It was just a bunch of weeds and nothing. And over the last year or so, they're transforming this into an outdoor garden space. They're trying to get it a certified habitat. Can't remember the certification, but basically native plants that will attract bees, lizards, salamanders, and frogs. And it worked because on the first day of school, Mr. Solberg walked out there and there was a northern red-legged frog. He taught me that. I do not know frogs, but now I do. And it was in this water filled with dillweed that they had, put out there. And this apparently, for Mr. Solberg, is a huge deal. It's a rare frog in our area. So for it to have decided that this was a good place to live was kind of let the students know what they're doing is working. And they're now building an area where hopefully more frogs will come. And they're hoping that they might even come there, mate, have tadpoles, and then start the whole cycle of life there. Another staff recognition, a true product of Evergreen, Michelle Bethune over at Evergreen High School. She was a graduate Evergreen. She was a star athlete there on the volleyball team and gymnastics team. And in her yearbook, she actually wrote that she wanted to return to Evergreen and be the head volleyball coach. And she is the head volleyball coach at Evergreen now. And so she's really rebuilding that program. The students really connect with her for obvious reasons because she's been there. She's also worked security there, so she's there all day with them, and that relationship is really helping the students bond with her and build that program. And finally, Clarissa Hightower is part of the A4LE organization whose primary focus is creating better learning spaces. She is now a Jedi because she's a part of the region. Each A4LA region has a justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion group, also known as JEDI. These groups are trying to break down barriers to make sure that school designs work for all our students. And so she is part of a roundtable that meets to discuss this. So hopefully future schools will fit for all students. So.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I do have a question. Does the frog have its own Instagram or TikTok page?
It does not, but if you hear the students, we're debating on what to name it. So I thought that was cool. And I will say, they thought the frog was going to leave after the first rain, but it did not. I'm sure by now it might have headed to safer ground, but learned more about frogs in one day than I had in my entire life.
What an
That's right.
exciting way to talk about science and, the earth and all of that. How engaging for the kids that must be.
Yeah, and they were working really hard out there. I mean, they're raking, they're watering, they work in groups, and they each have kind of their own. Some people are in charge of like the bees and different parts of the whole group, and they research what they have to do. And once again, they're going to get this garden certified.
That's great. Thanks so much.
Was Mr. Silberg the one who did the QR codes last
He
year?
is the one who did the QR codes, yes.
Okay.
He's now
I've got a connection there.
Yes,
Yeah.
he's my,
Very creative.
he's awesome. I said
Yeah.
he could do a science show if they're ever looking to do something that locally, he'd be perfect.
Thank you.
So much. Next up, we have a budget update. I'd like to call up Chief Financial Officer Jennifer Jacobson to present a budget update to the board.
Or two, so please bear with me. So I just have a very short report for you tonight. I'm going to talk a little bit about enrollment, where we're at with 21-22 and kind of the effects of the pandemic over the last couple of years. I'm working on closing out the books for 2021, so I'll give you a preliminary kind of ending fund balance. It's not official yet. It still needs to go through the ESD review and that, but we're pretty close. And then also I wanted to talk about ESSER funds and how those have really helped to, come in and fill the gaps that we've had due to the decrease in enrollment. So my first slide is student enrollment, our average annual FTE. So for projected 21-22, we have 22,528. So keep in mind, for the current year, we've only had the September and October enrollment count so far. We took kind of historical trend data and projected out that we'd be around 22,528 this year. However, with pandemic and the fluctuations, it's, you can see it, it's some fluctuations there. If you go back to 1920, so that was the first year when the pandemic hit. The kids went home in March. So we did not have count dates in April, May, and June that year. So that really is just a reflection of September through March count dates. Typically enrollment goes up a little bit and evens out, and then we usually see a decline towards the end of the year. So for 1920, we had an abbreviated year for enrollment, and that's what we were funded on, was the 24,520. And then you skip to the next year, 2021, where we started the year in remote and went to the hybrid model. And our enrollment dipped down to 23,198. So that is about a 1,300 FTE drop between the 2 years. Just looking straight at the effect that had on our apportionment, that was about a $9 million drop between 1920 to 2021 due to decrease in enrollment. We also saw decreases in transportation and also our levy equalization tied to enrollment drop. So, and then circling back to the projected 21-22, so we have another about 670 FTE decrease this year. So across those 2 years was about an 8% change, negative change, almost 2,000 students. Luckily, we did have ESSER funds that came in and helped us, fill the gaps from these decreases in enrollment and have some stability for our district. And I'll talk about that a little bit more on a couple more slides. The next slide, so our preliminary fund balance, we started 2021 with about 28.2 million. And we look like we're going to be ending with a fund balance of a little over 29 million. So we were able to use those ESSER funds to fill in some of those decreases that we saw due to the pandemic. So ESSER stands for Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Funds. There were various different packages that passed throughout the years. We ended up claiming about 3.9 million in ESSER 1 funds this year. For 1920, we had claimed about $1 million. So we have exhausted those funds. ESSER 2 is 6.5. ESSER 3, those are the newest funds. We've just spent about $1 million on summer school. And then there was a governor's emergency fund that supported technology. So we bought devices with that. So overall, we claimed about 12.4 million in ESSER funds last year, 2021. As far as how those were used, ESSER 1 funds, you can see about 3.9 million was spread across everything from PPE to supplies, enhanced cleaning services. We were able to buy devices for those students in the remote learning environment. And then we also were able to fund some of the excess unemployment costs that we incurred because of the pandemic. For ESSER 2, 6.5 million total claimed. We were also able to cover benefits for the employees that had to be furloughed for that brief period of time. We also were able to fund 22 certificated staff because the enrollment did not support the number of staff we had, but we were able to use ESSER funds to try to keep that consistent and have some consistency for kids in the schools, and more for enhanced cleaning. And then lastly, other ESSER funds. So the ESSER 3 funds, these were specifically for learning loss. It's a set aside. And so we charged our summer school expense to that of $1 million. And then this governor's emergency education relief fund, in which we were able to provide a couple thousand more devices out to our students through those additional funds. So that's really all I had to say. Does anyone have any questions?
I don't have a question. I just have a comment. I was just in the enrollment part, the running start surprises me that it's dropped. I would have thought that that would have been one that would have increased over. Just an
It
observation.
surprised me as well, yeah.
Yeah.
We really saw the larger drop was in the primary, age groups.
You know, I would have just thought with online options and things that
Right.
people would have chose to do running start,
Right.
but a dip.
And we do only have through the October count, so maybe we got some late signers.
And that could be
you know,
because
the
Clark
college starts
starting,
later.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That could be.
Does the K-5 band, does the enrollment drop skew towards kindergarten, or is it more evenly distributed?
It's mostly, a lot in kindergarten or first grade is where we're seeing huge drops over the last couple of years. So,
But it's surprising that it is kind of spread out. We've had the last two classes in kindergarten have been real small classes. But even, you had larger fourth and fifth grade classes. Of course, fifth grade goes to sixth grade, but the third and fourth grade classes have even declined a little bit. You typically have the number stay flat or increase year to year with a little bit of growth, and that is not happening. Now, what I'll say to add to Jennifer's report is our jump from September to October was greater than what we typically see. So it could be that the pattern may change this year as parents become more comfortable returning their students to school. So we have to kind of see how that all plays out.
Or Mike, I don't know. Can you give an example or two about what's charged under indirects? What kinds of expenses those are?
So the indirects are just to help fund the administration of the grants and kind of overhead. So everything that goes into.
Sort of
Heat,
quasi
light, the
cost of doing
insurance,
business
things.
funds?
Yeah,
Right,
funding?
exactly.
right.
I just had that one comment.
Okay, Rachel, do you have anything? No. Great,
Thank
Thank
for
you.
bringing
We're
it
glad
things
you're
like
here.
this.
I like
Thanks,
this
Jennifer.
format.
Thank you.
You too.
But you're not questioning the previous.
No,
format.
Well, we're kind
Yes.
of feeling
Well,
like we
yes,
like it.
we are.
For
Jennifer,
making comment.
can I just say thank you for coming, Jennifer? Appreciate it. And I think you can still make it to your daughter's flute concert.
Oh, gosh. Okay, next up, we have board comments. Anybody have anything they'd like to reference?
Reminder, tomorrow night is our Region 6 meeting for WASDA. It's now virtual. all virtual, because I think only Rob and I were signed up for in-person, so. If you can join us.
We
tomorrow
were
evening.
2 of the 4 people signed up for in-person, weren't we? Yeah.
So, join us if you can,
And it's where?
virtual.
So there's no in-person at all?
No,
Oh,
no,
okay.
it was supposed to be in Kelso, and then only 4 people signed up in person, and then,
Okay.
so it all went virtual.
Yeah, this is the week of the General Assembly, which was delayed from September to now because COVID turned it virtual. We've got the regional meeting followed by, I've got legislative committee meetings and so forth, but we'll be doing the General Assembly on Friday and Saturday. That's a public meeting anybody can go see if you're inclined to do so, but I've been given the voting credentials for Evergreen, and I think I have a pretty good picture. If we've got a legislative piece of the workshop, maybe we could get into some details about the priorities or arguments you'd like me to bring forward, or be sure to speak out on this but not that kind of thing. It's like I said before, with the STARS formula legislation that we were asked to move through the WASDA process, it was uncontroversial, and I anticipate that it'll continue to be uncontroversial. We certainly put our numbers into it when it comes to the legislative piece. I have Community Action Advisory Board meeting scheduled for the following Tuesday, next week. So I'll be touching base with topics around housing status, difficulties obtaining housing. I might have some things to bring back at the next meeting, and looking forward to the tour on the 3rd of East and Mountain View.
Wow. What do you think, Laura?
I do not.
You want to give any insights on the adult meeting? It was your first time there.
I fell way in over my head. It was, I really liked the format and the continuous breaking up into small groups. I thought that was really helpful. It did remind me a lot that in education, we use a lot of lingo and words and just even sentence structure that is very foreign still to me, even after almost 3 years on the board. And so there are just some things that I had a really hard time following. But I thought it was a really well-run meeting, and really obviously a lot of preparation went into it, and I appreciate that. And I feel like I did learn some things, but I often just felt like I was a good 10 steps behind everyone else. So
Well,
hopefully
your
I'll
first
catch up.
one, so
Yeah.
it did, just to tag on to that real quick, our homework had to do with the Courageous Conversations work that we've been doing and talking about leadership and power structures and things like that, of that nature. So I'm going to revisit that reading in our Courageous Conversations book. And so I probably will bring forward to the board here soon a recommendation for a workshop on how our leadership impacts the rest of the work and how that interfaces with our equity work. And so just know that's on my mind and coming our way. So reread your books, because it's starting to be real now.
Okay.
Sure is. I could piggyback on that just to say that when NSBA was through here and WASDA's leadership was through here 2 weeks ago, and I told you about how much they like the schools, one of the things I forgot to mention was they had their attention drawn to Clarissa's presentation and Julie's presentation. I know there were more people in that, but bear with me. And it was also one of those things that's just like, give it to us, we'll share it with others around the state. This is a model for how this kind of work could be done. And I really just want to, again, express appreciation for the way that Clarissa and Julie and the others prepared and presented that, this presentation in terms of what is taught
Mhm.
was, really, they called it really inspirational. They called it really inspirational. I thought that was worth sharing too.
Thank you. Lily?
Oh, I already had mine about the Region 6 meeting.
Well, you and I were both at the strategic planning meeting. And Julie and I will be meeting with the team that's working with us on the strategic plan tomorrow, just for a quick meeting to talk about how our policy work, our equity work, all of that interfaces, and make sure we're all kind of moving in the right same direction and stuff. And so we'll have a little
We
more.
have a lot of work about with our mission and vision statement and how that's kind of finalizing. And I'm not sure what the timeline is. Maybe we'll find out more tomorrow about when it comes to the community for input. So is that, I feel
like January.
so we're getting close, really. It's just
Yeah.
right around the corner. But some good work by that committee.
Interesting. And again, I like that it involves the community, different staff in different positions and that. So lots of voices being heard, and we'll have even more as we roll out the work from that committee for public input. Anything else? Okay. Next up, future agenda items. Do we have anything other than the one I hinted at that will probably come once I know more of what I think it should look like?
Probably already there, but we're going to have an opportunity, a window of time to prioritize WASDA's legislative positions. You remember a few months ago, I talked about asking us to adopt as the board's position as many of the legislative positions as makes sense, which I think will let Melissa Gombowski and Marissa Rathbone and the others coordinate a little better. They can say affirmatively, this is also Evergreen's position, and kind of proceed with the same vocabulary. I'm hoping we can do that work during November, December.
Are you talking about once we get the positions, the prioritization from WASDA's?
Yeah, we have
from the
a
General
window of
Assembly?
time to prioritize according to district priority. We've always had the same general priorities, but it might be nice to meet with one or two and just look at the list and go, okay, can we adopt this sort of by resolution as our positions as well? Evergreen's got a lot of voice in those councils now, and I think we're very much aligned. So,
Okay,
coming soon.
coming soon. All right. Anything else? Have citizen comments. This is for citizens who wish to address the board about things that were not on tonight's agenda, that are not legal or personnel in nature. And we do ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. And I've got 2 people that have signed up. Todd Olson. I'm sure that they're not online, because like we had some people that came and then.
I think Todd might be the one that was online.
Okay. So since Todd is not here, then we have Chris Christensen. Please state your name and address for the record, please.
Yeah, my name is Chris Christensen. I live at 15025 Northeast 31st Street, Vancouver, Washington, 98682.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. My concern is as we've seen, that the school boards push the mask mandate for the most part across the United States. And I can get that within reason, but a lot of the studies are showing that mask mandates cause you to we don't follow the proper mask mandates that follow CDC guidelines. We reuse our mask, we don't wear it by OSHA standards, we don't follow. think it was 4 hours and you're supposed to dispose of the mask last time I looked from my OSHA 30 class in construction when I was doing it, but that's neither here nor there. The other thing I have is if we're gonna start pushing a vaccine mandate on our kids, it's just a matter of time before it comes down that road. And there's waning efficacy that's happening with the vaccines. People can believe me or not. The research papers are already out there. They're in Israel, they're in England. And what I'm finding is it's pretty logarithmic under 30 that your increases of myocarditis and pericarditis dramatically increase in kids under 30. And Canada stopped giving certain vaccines to people under 30 because they're having increased risks of myocarditis, pericarditis. And I just want to voice my concern that if we push these on our younger kids, which for the most part are pretty resilient to this. We go across the United States and we look at CDC data from last year, and we're a population of what, 330 million people. So 20% of our population is kids, which that number around 60, 70 million. And based off of the CDC data that we can all look up, and you can go to, what was the CDC website? I think you can look it up for the United States, get an Excel form, and it was COVID-19 tracking by sex and age. You can pull up a file and you break that out. There was 198 kids that passed away to COVID last year, 178 kids that was to flu, and 601 kids to pneumonia. And if you look in Oregon and Washington, we have viral and bacterial pneumonia in almost every age group from in segments of 10. So basically 10 to 20, 20 to 30, 40 to 50, and so on. Pneumonia is more deadly than COVID, but nobody talks about that. We keep scaring everybody with this. And yes, it is deadly, but the majority of people that are passing away are the elderly, not our children. And my concern is if we start vaccinating our kids and forcing that on them, we're going to have raised cases of myocarditis, pericarditis. And when I look at the data out of England right now, because they seem to be months ahead of us because of the Delta variant, and you can find that, sorry. Yes. Yeah.
Needs in our district, so
I would just like to
But I
bring it up
appreciate-
beforehand, because if
Okay,
I don't
that's
discuss
fine.
it, then people don't, a lot of people don't know. We get told what's told by the media,
Mm-hmm.
and nobody ever says it, and we're turning out, and they're flip-flopping and changing all the time.
Okay.
And the data I'm bringing up is actually peer-reviewed studies out of England and Israel, and I can't find any in the United States because they're not updating their data frequently. So I understand there's no vax mandates right now, but we have a government that's pushing for it, and California's pushing for it. So it's just a matter of months, in my opinion, before we have Inslee pushing for it.
Okay, thank you for coming and sharing that information with us tonight.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Do we have anybody online that's? Okay,
Wasn't there somebody had their hand raised though? Yeah, no? Oh, I don't know.
we can go ahead and do that as long as,
Could be that thought.
who do we have on the line? John, are you there? State your full name. Could you please state your full name and address for the record, please? We would be happy to have somebody connect with you. The superintendent can do that and get you some information. That's not quite accurate, so he can go ahead and connect with you. Is that okay? As you know, that at local board meetings, we're not allowed to respond to citizen comments other than get clarifying questions. And then, but we will have the superintendent reach out to you to go over that with you so that you'll have that information. That's great. Thank you. Appreciate your comments. Is there anybody else? Okay. To recess, we will have where we will sign documents. Then we will go into a board workshop where we will have conversation regarding coherence governance policies. Student representatives, although that one, since Jenny's not here, may not be able to happen. Legislative update. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
First up is our coherence governance policies.
We can give it a start. Lori, if you have a way to, I think what happened last time was that there was, I had struggles with the technology. There were, this is just, and this is a big enough subject and we heard enough feedback, right? That Vic opened up a agenda item right in the workshop so that we could have this informal discussion about the feedback from the Equity Policy Committee and from Jamila and Clarissa and some others about the word respect in policy, which actually led me to another question today about a different thing. But I'll ask that later. And what we did was Rachel and I took the work item to sit and think about how to align the policy with the proposal for the operational expectation, as well as dig into the respect thing a little more. And I think Rachel's probably the best person to talk about what we learned and what we put together for you.
Okay, so first I want to thank Clarissa for taking the time to chat with me last week about this. I had missed the meeting where this was discussed, so Rob helped catch me up as well. So, obviously our hope in creating this policy is not to offend people, especially populations who have historically been harmed by the educational system. And so that definitely took some education for me to understand how the word respect and respectful can be offensive and harmful. And so even after I had a conversation with Clarissa, I Googled it and read some articles and stuff about it as well. And I really do hope anyway that I understand now that why it's offensive and why it may present as offending to some people in our community. And Clarissa helped me see that, in using the word respect and respectful, what we're really trying to convey is that we want people to treat each other with kindness, compassion, consideration, and that this word respect can have a lot of different meanings in different cultures. For example, in some cultures, making eye contact is respectful, and keeping your eyes downward cast is disrespectful, and it, vice versa in a different culture. And we do have students coming to us from all different cultures, and so what they're being taught in their homes may be different. We used the example, that in some homes, raising your voice is not disrespectful, and in other homes it is. Same with using foul language, things like that. They're just different families, different cultures, different expectations for what is or is not respectful or civil. And really, I feel like it comes down to the idea that respect is something that needs to be earned. And it's not something that's just easily given to strangers or to people who have been oppressive or harmful to you, or who are part of a system who has been oppressive and harmful to you or your ancestors. And that's something that's really important to me, is not offending people, and also realizing that we could be more specific in our language when, what I'm thinking of is, times where we just have interactions with people in public or in our community. I think to myself, I use the word respectful in my head, I'm respectful of others. I say thank you, I say excuse me, I try to move about the world, but I understand that that term can have different meaning for different people, and that for a lot of people, respect is something a little bit different than what I'm showing other people in the world. I'm showing them consideration. I'm showing them kindness. And what, and that's something that I would show to all people. However, people that I don't know or people who have harmed me don't necessarily deserve my respect. And, it's kind of, I think, maybe like a vestige of, older times where it would be, respect your elders or listen to your elders, don't talk back. That's definitely not the type of community we want to promote and build in Evergreen. And, but we do want people to, so the word that comes to my mind is be respectful of others, but what we really want them to do is to be considerate, compassionate, kind, civil towards other people, to listen to them thoughtfully, to respond to them in kind. And so in thinking about that and kind of digesting that, then Rob and I spoke, and I kind of conveyed the same information to him and my thoughts on it. And I think we both agreed that, we definitely don't want to send this message out there about that could possibly be taken in a commanding way, in a disrespectful way, and in a way that brings up past harms, or is reminiscent of past harms. So I think that it's prudent of us to move forward with different language than the word respectful. So we have proposed 3.1 be amended to say, be considerate and compassionate towards others, as opposed to be respectful and compassionate towards others. So that's the big change that we made. I think the rest, we did change 3.2 from what's proposed. And that also kind of spells out what we're really like asking of each other, of our students, of our teachers, of everybody in our district when they engage with others, is to be empathetic, be civil, be compassionate, and treat others with dignity.
So 3.1 wouldn't change from what it is right now?
I think
The-
that's the original
first-
one.
yeah.
This is
The first reading one is on the left,
Oh, I see, okay.
and the proposals to amend are on the right.
Is
In
that what
addition-
we had last time, or is this?
This
the
is,
proposal?
this is a clean version of the document we had last time, instead of having all the confusing underlines and crossouts and so forth.
And it has the language.
And it has the language change. So instead of, one of the other things that we got in feedback was that not calling out a difference is better than calling out a difference in policy. And so there's also an omission of, or, race, ethnicity, or other difference. And it says simply be considerate and compassionate toward others. Discuss controversial issues with civility and respect. Change to discuss and engage in controversies and uncomfortable issues with empathy, civility, compassion, and dignity. Okay. Who are different, again, not to call out the difference. 3.4, same, 3.5 is the same, and 3.6, proposing 3.7 read celebrate and share rather than contribute, and perspectives stemming from their unique identities, including their own racial, cultural, ethnic, and family identities. So that legal phrase, it's like, but not limited to, is sort of implied there, so that other identities can be fronted that might necessarily be the most important or the focus of a results policy for students. Then the design here is to create something that frees people to express rather than aligning a person to a result. I think. Is that a good way to put it, do you think? Yeah. I really liked the suggestions and the reasons for the suggestions that people were feeding back to us. And so that's what you see there is as much as is possible is an expression of that ambition from parents and teachers and students to be free, if you will, through a policy like this. Will we measure that? I just had a screensaver, come on.
No, I do not. Yeah, but I had to keep going off of that. Sure will.
Concerns. I appreciate the changes. I'm super appreciative of the addition of the word dignity. It is a part of what we are attempting to make sure that our teachers and students are aware of. It's a newer word that we're utilizing, but it was also present in that presentation that you're talking about, that's being shared widely, because there's these 10 elements to what dignity consists of, and respect isn't one of them. But it's something that is inherent. It's a your value of life. As soon as you were born, right? This is something that was given to you. And so I appreciate it being there. I also will speak on behalf of the committee in that they are appreciative of their comments and their input being heard and listened to and then represented here, based on what they've shared with you. And again, 2 of them reached out to let me know that they were appreciative of you coming when you did to listen that evening at our meeting. So thank you for that.
It's one of the other things is that we had this moment in the last meeting where everybody was kind of uncomfortable about what to do, and some of that was because this was a new concept and we had to do some learning. Some of it was technology, but it struck me that if we're doing equity work, discomfort comes with it, and I appreciate the time that you've opened up to have this discussion in the more informal setting, after their committee had the chance to give their input.
I think that we learned a couple of things, aside from had it in probably matter. I think we learned that, especially things of this importance, that we need to make sure that we're front loading conversations and plan, all the other. So I'm glad we took a breath. Onto something that I personally feel. Right, when I use the word respect. In ways it's so almost graceful in its
Well, first, it is much easier to read the 2 side by side, and so I think moving forward, this is how we should do all of our policy review. And so I was looking at the ones from last time, and I think respectful was still in, but we had a lot of conversation about it being removed, so I think that might have been some of the confusion, but I do like the replacement of the word considerate for respectful. That makes a lot of sense, and I don't think we had that word last time, right? That's Rachel, what you added in?
Well, yeah, Rob and I after our conversation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I think dignity was in there in the change from last time, I think. Yes, it was.
It was there
It was.
next to respect, empathy, civility, respect, and dignity.
It was in the markup from last time, but not the original. I do like that. In fact, all of it reads, and it must, the only thing that I still, I guess, had a question on was the uncomfortable issues, but I think Clarissa addressed that last time because that's the part about encourages conversations. So I'm satisfied with that being in there.
So what could happen is, when we open this up in the next meeting, one of us can move to amend and replace the language from first reading with the text on the right. And then we vote on the amendment, and then we vote to pass the final thing. It could be the rules of order type approach. So we're saying aye twice to the right hand text.
The first motion to replace
So,
the
yeah.
words of the first reading with what we have now proposed,
Yeah.
and then second to approve.
And then, so we approve the amended language, and then we approve the final adoption.
So I'm curious to hear from other people. Bill, Devil, do you feel like, hey, you're not mister, but from a teacher standpoint, need teachers being able to understand this is a two-way street? Well, it should be, but
This is the results policy. The student focus.
Ryan, any thoughts? Mike?
I think it's great. I mean, for the, I appreciate the process that got you to this point. I appreciate the conversations that occurred between the meetings and the engagement. And I think it looks great.
I think we already see a lot of, if you go to elementary schools, they create identity and culture. I think we already see a lot of this present in he should be and behave, but it could stand to, policy like this could stand to inform and modify that towards greater equity, couldn't it? Measure all of this.
That is going to be interesting, but I'm sure Mike will come up with something.
Are we going to measure it? And I'll bring a motion next meeting.
Thanks for
Appreciate
doing
that.
extra work on it.
We needed to take a
Thank you,
breath
Rachel.
and really look at it, and I'm glad we did.
And Rachel wasn't here last time
Yeah,
too.
so-
that-
It was a good call.
Okay,
Do you want to do the citizenship piece or the
Yeah.
OE?
we. There's some things around here. I don't know why I lost my page.
Get the
Oh, wait, no,
right things docked to the right things, I think.
I'm supposed to, I don't know.
Where'd you go? Okay. So, sorry about the markup here. But the proposal, the initial proposal for the citizenship policy was simple. Instead of having demonstrate cultural competency in the citizenship policy, we were lifting that and moving it into the equity policy with the modifications and suggestions from community and staff. That was the only thing that I had imagined for the citizenship policy this time around. When I met with Clarissa's committee, they really expressed a great ambition to modify this policy altogether. And they made so many suggestions in such a short period of time that it became evident that this would be more work than we were planning for this cycle. We also had Mr. Hightower, and your daughter also spoke on this, didn't she? The idea of citizenship, or was that a different, do you remember? Yeah, it was just him. But he was talking about the tech company that he worked for and the discovery that the word citizenship meant something different than we assume it does in a dominant culture, right? What I think would be the wisest thing to do, maybe you could reflect back at me and agree or disagree, would be to go ahead and pass just the omission in the second reading, but also to recognize that titles of policies are not parts of policies, that we can go ahead and just decide by consensus to call this something else without having to vote on it, because the policy itself is the language under the title. That's a practice that the WASDA bylaws and the legislative positions have under their rules. And that's why I believed it was possible to do that. And we could just change the word citizenship to a different word and work on this policy with the input mechanisms and the citizen and staff input coming into the next year. Now, on the 9th, but then also plan to revise it based on possible community input, or we make that a point of workshop and ask people to come in and talk about how this should change to more fully include.
I don't really care one way or the other, but are we thinking that it's a lot of change? Or is it just some wordsmithing situation?
It sounds like just the title. Isn't that what we're proposing, what
I
you're?
think Mr. Hightower had just the title in mind
Okay.
when he spoke. The Citizen Advisory, the Citizen Policy Committee, of course, had many more things that they wanted to say about this.
What were some of the proposed name changes? Did we even get one? Or is it just something to think about?
I think we kind of left it at the place of someone's calling for not citizenship, but something else. We haven't done that work yet.
Sometimes I look at this in a couple of ways. I think it's like the citizenship, like, oh, do you have your citizenship? Or do you pay taxes and do all of those things? Or what does it mean to be like, how do you make your community better? And, you don't necessarily have to, I don't know another phrase. I can't think of something right off the top of my head of what you would call that.
Well, I think because,
Barry, go ahead.
I mean, I think that's what we want. We want people, when they leave our system, they want them to be part of our community, right? We want them to make our communities better. The communities that they live in, we want them to be able to serve and make better, right? So that's citizenship in a form, but what else can that be called?
Engagement.
also a place to talk about citizenship as we mostly define it. And while all of us are not US citizens, there's still a responsibility to the community, like you said, pay their taxes, do their, so how do we And I don't want to just throw away the term citizenship, because right now we're in a situation as a country where democracy is being challenged. So we have to have a understanding of the civics of things.
So
It
here,
doesn't mean that the people that don't have our US citizenship aren't a part of our community and our, you know, it's like, how do we mesh all that together? That's what I'm kind of wrestling with here.
here's a list of like defined things about what makes a person a better citizen. Volunteer to be active in your community. Be honest and trustworthy. Follow rules and laws. Respect the rights of others. Be informed about the world around you. Respect the property of others. Be compassionate. Take responsibility for your actions. So I feel like that's what we're trying to encompass under this.
Just look up citizenship definition is a member, a citizen of
Yes,
the country.
yeah.
So I can see where people would have potentially have problems with that. If you just, so you're right, Julie, they're all these things, but at the same time, if you go to the definition, it speaks and you know, it's referred to in a democratic society. So I mean, it's kind of like, you can read that a lot of different ways. I don't see that much different than the conversation that Rachel just had around respect. There's a way, because community minded, I mean, just even something with community in there maybe is a way.
Would you like to see the notes that I took from that meeting? Okay. This is going to be messier,
Oh, what's in it?
but that it? Oh, yeah. So they suggested community and civic engagement. No one practiced the duties, rights, and responsibilities involved with civic engagement. Recognize the diversity of cultures that exist and have existed. And this is messier because it is. We quickly recognize that it's unfinished big work.
Yeah, it's fine. Just to give us an idea of where people were, what their thinking was on it.
Yeah, in parentheses, someone suggested, know how diverse cultures have existed in our country and practice the ability to think and shape a society. I was just typing. Where integrated civic engagement can push for an improved democracy. There's a lot of meaty good ideas in that. Advocate confidently, effectively, and to take responsibility for change. You kind of feel the semantic shift away from one orientation to a broader one, a more equitable one. That way to approach advocating for change. Take responsibility as stewards of their environment. That's as far as we got.
So I'm wondering if we should not have more input from committee, because this isn't work of the committee itself, is it? Is this a couple members of the committee? Who were you getting this input from?
They
Rob?
were speaking.
Who's they?
They would be Clarissa's Citizen Policy Committee.
Okay.
Equity Policy Committee. And I, on the screen, said we're going to remove this line. And when they opened that up to discussion, it was like, no, please consider these things. And there were a lot of things. What we can do without going through two readings, though, is we could change R5 or 6 now from citizenship to community and civic engagement. I think at least dialectically, still captures that value of the community around civics. Um, and gives us room to further modify the policy and really take our time. Student results that
Those little wheels are turning.
I feel like we have two different ideas of citizenship kind of existing at the same time. And I mean, citizen, like a lot of words in our language, there are different meanings. And, you know, the notes that you have from that meeting make me think of citizenship in the term of being a citizen of the United States and what rights and responsibilities do we have to vote or not, you know, choice to vote, not vote, abide by the Constitution, not, you know, abide by the laws, blah, 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 like that kind of citizenship. And then I have this other, like, I thought what we really meant by this citizenship piece was more like how to be a good citizen within school and community environments. And that is not have anything for me to do with voting and understanding how our government works, but that has so much to do with how you treat other people, how you take responsibility for your impact on your environment, how you know, like littering could be like being a good citizen would be picking up trash, not littering. But that has zero to do with our understanding of our democracy, our understanding of our history of our country and our government. So they're just two extremely different ideas for me. And so I thought we were going with the don't litter, be nice to people, engage in making your world better. That we can teach kids as, you know, young as preschool how to do little things, and they clearly can't vote or campaign or lobby versus political stuff. I kind of feel like we're mixing some of these notes or mixing those two ideas together, and it would be helpful for me to understand which, well, whether I'm alone in my separation of those two ideas.
No, that's what that list that I read feels like it coincides with what you're talking about. And that's what I look at is
Yeah.
when I think of citizenship, that list of find ways to serve your community.
If
How do
I-
we do that?
If I remember from our policy development discussion, that summer of 17, is that citizenship was something we wanted as a way to capture results policies around the civics of it, right? The rights, responsibilities, dignities, democratic society. It's the way we govern together. Sense that I took away.
We also were really concerned during that time on kind of where number 2 is about how to advocate for what you believe in. I've never quite felt like appropriately, because what's appropriate, you know, but
Yes.
wanting kids to understand that even as young people, they have the ability to make change. They have the ability to advocate for things they believe in. And so that piece probably falls more under not the citizenship, constitution, even though there are components of that obviously in our constitution about freedom of speech and all of that. That's kind of more the technical side of it. But I know that we were really wanting to help our students understand how they can do those things and empower them so like they could be agents of change.
Yeah, I think one thing that we need to keep in mind is that we have students and student families who are not citizens of the United States.
Right.
That throughout their education, even if a student attends Evergreen schools K through 12, they may never be a citizen of the United States.
Right.
Their future may not lie in residing in the United States, or they may never have an ability to vote, and therefore affect change in that way of being, you know, a voter and enjoying other rights that citizens may have. So I'm wondering if just some of the notes from the other side for me get a little too into our country's government and, you know, its operation. And that seems more, obviously, you know, we definitely have curriculum around how it works and
We also have statute
our
requiring
history.
curriculum.
yeah, which
Yeah.
I have no qualms with that. I absolutely think that, you know, I would love for our students to understand how governments of many different countries work, not just ours. But ours is a great place to start. However, I do want to keep in mind that, you know, choosing words, I don't want to exclude people
Mhm.
or offend people. And I feel like if we're really focusing on the citizenship part of having this results policy that is creating good citizens, well, we're not just creating citizens of the United States, we're also shaping the lives of people who may be citizens of other countries.
I'm not disagreeing with you at all. I'm
Yeah.
with you on this. There's this side and these two kind of. I think that where you're talking about going is more like what we had in mind originally,
Okay.
because you can advocate for change and not be a US citizen.
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
know, I mean, so I think that that is where our intention originally was back when we first started writing the citizenship.
That matches my recollection, yeah.
And the be good stewards of their environment is to Rachel's point too, that no
Mhm.
matter where they land, when they're, you know, when they're gone from Evergreen Public Schools, right, they might live in another country, we don't know, but we want them to be good stewards of their environment and be an active participant in whatever community they live in.
And I mean, and, you know, community being so many different levels of community. I
Mhm.
mean, the school is a community, your
The
neighborhood is a
neighborhood.
community, your city is a community, your county, your state, your country.
Your work.
I was
Your
just gonna
work,
say
yeah.
your work.
Places you
Interconnectedness.
volunteer, yeah, the
Yeah.
interconnectedness. I love that be good stewards of their environment. That is, I want to keep that in there personally. I think that's a great,
That makes me happy.
right, that just completely embodies what I want for, you know, for our students, for future community members. So I agree totally with you, Vic, about appropriately. I think that's very subject to interpretation. It also has a ring of, it means whatever the teacher or the administrator of the day decides it means.
Well,
Yeah.
there's the backstory about the word appropriately, if you recall.
It was
We
from
took- We took the policies.
the Honored Citizens
Yeah,
Community Tour.
and I think we were presenting that about the same time as the March for Our Lives. Demonstrations were ramping up and grappling with how to support students who wanted to express themselves. But we heard from some citizens, some community members, that they wanted advocacy to be appropriate, which meant something very specific to them, I think. But since we began the equity work and things, we've been getting insights and feedback that suggests that the word has a coding that kind of
about
puts
eff-
people in their place.
What about effectively?
Sure.
And that's something that people have to learn. That they have to be taught how to be an effective advocate.
Yeah.
And also for the seniors of the world and stuff, if you're not effective, you won't be effective if your approach is something that they would probably see as inappropriate.
Right.
I mean, like, I don't think anybody's really that fond of the people that during the Black Lives Matter burned down the stores. That would be one of those things that they think it was not appropriate. But yet, but was that an effective way? That would, that would be the question. Was that an effective way for change, to change? So,
Yeah, well, and you know what I think is interesting about, that example is
we've
that
got
was
Clarissa,
effective.
that arm's up, and she's looking,
That was absolutely
Come on
effective
down.
for some people. Some
For some
audiences
people.
absolutely receive,
yeah.
destruction of property as an effective tool to get a message across and for action. Some audiences, like you indicate, found that to be excessive or inappropriate, but there's a huge history there. And, there's a lot politically behind that. And, we can't, I think, expect continued peaceful protests from people who are continuously oppressed by our
I
government and our
agree.
country. So
Because big change in our country has always come
from big action.
with big action.
Yeah.
All right, Clarissa, you were such a patient person.
Come on over.
Hear you.
Rachel, you took many of the words out of my mouth. Yeah, because we can talk about what effectiveness looks like. If it can get people to look at you, to notice you, the oppressed, then effective. However, what I want to say about how we kind of expanded upon 5.1, we took our cue from what number 1 said. And so since we saw words like rights and democratic and society, it led to some of the additions that we have. And we did have, we added effectively down there to 5.2, so you said effective. That, yes, we agree with that. Let's put a quantifier there. However, if we're gonna go with what do you consider that line right underneath the title? Is that a definition? Like students understand, model, that part? What is that called?
That is preamble.
That's what I was thinking
Okay.
too. I'm like, the
So each of
preamble?
these policies
The
has a
introduction?
sentence on top
Okay.
that captures the idea.
Uh-huh.
So it's the big idea.
Uh-huh.
And then underneath that are specifics around which we think data is possible to gather.
Right. Okay.
So
So then that as a preamble, if you will, to what we have listed down there, I think speaks to what Rachel is saying. She assumed, or what we thought the results policy was about that. And then 5.1 starts talking about things like rights and democracy. So I think if we're gonna take the direction that Rob just said, which is continue to think more about this, and that can be relayed to committee. We have a committee member here. We can relay the message of, we want to stick to what the preamble is saying around like community and civic engagement, which is the name we replaced with citizenship, rather than focusing on like government-like things that are taught in a government class. And then stay in line with things like you were talking about, Rachel, like, don't litter and things of that nature. But if we stick to what the preamble says, I think it'll help guide the feedback for 5.1, 2, and 3. We can revisit that if you're gonna go that route of continuing to take more input from us. We can do that. Just
Yeah.
let us know.
I mean, are we in a major rush? Can we take the time to let the community look at this
So
more?
that's what I'm suggesting is that it's big enough work that we could do citizenship, community, civic engagement, results policy work in the coming year as a response to the equity work that's come so far, and then invite public input about these issues into a revision that better captures and aligns with our equity policy.
Is there a reason why we shouldn't continue to gather input and write it correctly the first time instead of,
Like for next meeting?
no, it doesn't necessarily have to be our next meeting. I guess I feel like this is all so critical, so much that we're working on, that if we're always going to just put it up there and then we'll amend it later or whatever, I don't like that.
That's what I said last time about approving the equity policy as it was and then making changes. I said, we should get it right the first time.
Yeah,
I'm kind of.
I'd rather take the time now and get a draft that we
So
are totally happy with.
the proposal originally was just to remove the line.
As to what?
It was just to remove the line that now sits in the equity policy proposal. Demonstrate cultural competency, which was really expanded into the equity policy proposal, right? We could safely vote on removing that line, not let go of the other work that we need to do. Just make it a higher priority for our next workshops and
See what Rob's saying too.
And
that
make a-
all- that
yeah.
The whole point of revising this was just to remove the part out that's moving to the equity
the
results
work was to
policy.
create an equity results policy.
Yes. So if, by not taking that out, then it's sitting in both policies. And so if we approve the equity policy as it is next time, then our citizenship one will have that same line in it that's already covered in the other one. So
To me, it was
based on
housekeeping
that,
when
I feel like,
proposed it.
yes, that we should probably bring this back and remove that line and vote on it that way. And then if we want to revise the title and the content, we could do that or meeting and bring it back to a workshop and then take it through the whole process.
Yeah. And long and always thought that it was acceptable under our rules to change the title of something without having to go through 2 readings.
It sounds like now it's more than just changing the title.
Right.
I just don't want to lose momentum on the work we're
That's
doing.
kind of where I'm at on it.
But what if we just brought it back as a second reading next time and just take the one change and then we bring it back as a workshop at the following meeting and start it again? There's nothing that says we can't start it again, right?
No.
Yeah, we
You've
can
already got the
constantly amend
momentum going on. I agree
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah, we've got it in our other policies that we may amend these policies at any time. It's part of the board superintendent relationship
Yeah.
pieces.
Correct.
So, yeah, we don't have to lose momentum if we don't lose momentum, the 5 of us.
But we need to let's put it down as at the next board workshop, that we have a bigger discussion about this so that we can not lose momentum, we keep moving it forward. We can go ahead and do the procedural thing. And then let's just do it right and get it done and not sit there and wait. And think about it and let's get it done. I mean, we got a lot of policies going on. I want to get this stuff handled so that we can move forward with this stuff, because we've got our strategic plan that we're working on. All of this has to fit with. We've got our equity work that
Just
this
think how
definitely
exciting.
is part of it.
We're finally gonna have our equity policy. Just think about that.
Never thought I'd see the day. You know, it's something that a long time.
Well,
Please,
just
let's
a
do
couple
it.
more weeks. So yes, let's,
We
I
have
say-
a commitment to that.
yeah, let's bring it back for second reading with that change and then bring it either to workshop that night, because we only have one meeting in November. So,
Is our,
Yeah.
Do we
is our
have,
calendar getting like, not getting to look like? Okay.
Do we have
Clarissa?
time between now and then for the Equity Policy Committee to express a perspective about the citizenship work? We have that during the workshop next time, the 9th of November.
Oh, good.
Sure. That'll be working from the existing policy that we just adjust on the 9th. Then we'll workshop from that point and base, the data gathering elements there on the preamble or the big idea. And then their work would be share with us what you think equity looks like in a community engagement / citizenship policy. Focused on students. And I'll bring a motion next time to approve as amended, first reading, so it'll just be a straight up first reading.
Let's just keep it simple.
That'll be simple.
We'll do it properly and have it right so that we can, really love to see us start off the new year with this stuff kind of honed in and start the new year with purpose and conviction.
So the side thought that I had was the word respect is in our land acknowledgement. And
Well, that's something maybe to just check with the powers that be into their, because didn't we get that land acknowledgement from?
it was adjusted for the peoples and tribes who were historically here. But otherwise, it's basically what the Nisqually area school districts were using. Can't remember the name of the consultant or the school director who worked with that. Donna Sinclair was involved there.
I remember meeting her at, she's a petite lady, but she's a powerhouse. I wish I could remember what district she was from. It's on the east side, I think. Maybe I'm thinking of a different person.
Oh, I wrote to the tribes. I wrote to the Cowlitz tribe and to Chinook leader, Chinook Sam.
Well, I'm sure we have somebody here in town that. is
He's here in
connected.
town. He lives in your neighborhood, actually.
Okay, well then let's just find out from him.
What is the,
Whether the word respect belongs in a land acknowledgement, given what we've learned.
oh, the respect for all Indigenous students,
Yeah.
that one?
Giving them respect.
Because isn't that follow the same land acknowledgement that everybody in the entire state uses?
No, it differs from place to place.
I thought it just that was based on what the lands were, which tribe, but everything else, all the other wording was the
When-
same.
When Tim Garshow reads out a land acknowledgement, he's using a different set of words.
I thought it was the exact same.
Well, we can investigate.
Yeah, I mean, that's worth thinking and looking into.
We all are okay with where we're headed? Okay. Right on here, student representatives. Rachel, I don't know if you and Ginny even had 2 minutes to even,
No,
so we might need to
right, yeah.
table
that
this
was
right
on
now
there
without
today.
Ginny here and stuff, because I don't know how far she's gotten on this. I do know that when we go to WASDA, we're going to be attending some workshops and things on this, so
Mhm.
I think we table this until December, we only have one meeting in December, right? Maybe our December meeting, because we'll have been at WASDA. Hopefully, Jenny will be back with us,
Sounds good.
okay? Legislative updates.
I think that unless Rob's got anything, I think we got a pretty good one tonight already.
I was like, I think we already had it tonight.
It's really good to have Melissa.
You gotta get to Target.
A plea. I can send you the link to this handbook. You already switch away from me. General Assembly Handbook with all the position proposals, the bylaws, proposals, and so forth are published. Please go to the WASDA websites and skim over those. They almost always pass, and so we should try and be thinking about the beginnings of our prioritization work. Double check the deadline. If it's before the 9th, then I'm gonna need to call some people for help about the priorities and just make sure that things are aligned the way that we want them.
Well, and I think probably Melissa, along with the superintendents and that, are probably taking all that into consideration as well as they talk about our individual districts.
Right.
Because some, I remember when I was the ledge rep, some of them would be very applicable to small rural districts.
Many of them are still.
Larger districts, like, you know, so it's those kind of automatically kind of create a filter does it even apply to our district?
Be worth. I think I have a pretty good handle on what applies and doesn't apply to our district to make that discernment, but having another set of eyes to just look at the decision is what I'm looking to ask for. I can't seem to get this on a screen, Lori. It looks like this. And there are, where's the table of contents? Go to the different, yeah. You know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 15, 25. It's going to be a long weekend. One of them is an attempt to consolidate the safety position. I've talked about that before a little bit. We ran into a little bit of friction at the large school caucus meeting. The safety position, the school safety position had a big bullet list of things that should be safety. And then the student safety position was more general, more like a results policy really, than an operational thing. And the proposal is to consolidate the two and get rid of most of the bullets because they were answered in a change in statute. And you'd be kind of nervous when they lose the bullet list. So there's some explaining to do about that, but I'm hoping in here that that's Christine's bullet list. It's the next one. That instead of a comprehensive school and student safety thing that looks like this, it's condensed to recognize the changes in the law, but also to start centering student perspectives in safety, right? Student voice and policy development, providing appropriate parent notification, et cetera. A little bit of a bullet list, but it's in paragraph form. There's a call for funding. That was missing. And that's the kind of work that might or might not pass. Since closed it, thought I'd share with you that I'd done so. I remember
I was
that
gonna say, I don't remember.
We didn't discuss this as a board because it was more of a legislative committee consolidation work. But it's there in part to align.
Oh, wait,
Sorry,
Can we go back
that's the
up?
old position.
I want to see what it says about resource officers. What's the questions you had about some of that stuff?
That's the current, is that the current
That's the
WASDA
current
position?
WASDA position on school safety. And this down here is the comprehensive student safety position. Last paragraph here is the 71B21. Logic behind consolidating these two, these priority numbers here, 15 and 21, seem awful low down on the list for a safety position. Did some work to put it into a consolidation that looks like that. Bullet list is mostly not there anymore, is the 28A, 320, 124 RCW now contains most of the bullet list. In statute, kind of a victory.
Okay, so this here that we're looking at right now is what you're proposing and that it gets changed to
Yeah, one,
versus what was up above.
those are the current positions. The committee decided
Okay,
to consolidate these two into one.
okay. What had me concerned is some of that stuff, especially the one talking about SROs, depending on a school district's position on restorative practice, what the community actually can support. I mean, we have a situation here where it's not supported by the police departments.
Right.
I'm not saying it's a bad thing, I'm just saying the money isn't there.
Right.
So if it's coming down to this, or what each individual district is wanting to do based on what their community wants them to do.
Locally relevant and culturally responsible approaches for planning and managing student crises. It isn't all me. By the time it got to this point, it had been worked over by a subcommittee.
I mean, I'm more for this consolidated. Want to weigh in on this, Rachel? No.
It's too wonky
right
for
now.
this time of day. This is what the Evergreen perspective is doing in the legislative committee. Our story is informing these clearer, more agile legislative positions than have come along in the past. Folks to send in their delegate to help with it. And Cooper still
So
hasn't
is there
registered.
something that you need from us?
That most of it's going to pass, and I'm not talking about reading every word, but just skim over the positions and pick out what interests you, and then tell me if you see something that just jumps out and says, this has to be a high priority for us.
Again, reviewed all of this too, to make sure it's in alignment with the other work that we've already got going on.
Melissa Gomboski, I think she and Marissa Rathbone are in nearly daily contact with one another around this.
I think so.
Yeah,
They-
she'll be on the 2 days, and she can always help, Rob and I prioritize too at the end,
And if
so.
you looked at this,
Yeah, I think what Melissa's interaction always is just to make sure that we're not getting in the way of each other.
Right.
And making sure that, and it's really, I think, more often procedurally, how are we going about trying to get things done? I don't think there's usually disagreement over the thoughts. Sometimes we go well ahead of time. So the WASDA could move something forward that we don't necessarily agree with, but we have the ability to work through Melissa to let that know.
In my experience, it's 2 days of wordsmithing and changing out just a word here and a word there. So, like Rob said, it will be a long 2 days.
It'll be a long 2 days.
He's right
Most
on
of it-
that.
I'm really hoping most of it will be, the committee recommends do pass or do not pass, and the vote follows the committee recommendation. Most of them are. I think they're consolidating a bunch of stuff into a consent agenda style thing where we vote once for
that
a
would be
list
nice.
of non-controversial positions. No, they're doing that.
We also on Thursday evening are going to meet with the people who are signed up for the assembly in our region. So we can kind of preview some of the positions that we think might have an impact on us as a region.
Mhm.
So everybody can kind of get their thoughts together before General Assembly, which is people in our area.
That's great. Send out, I think Marissa has already sent out a note to, might have been copied on it. People who had original authorship or real interest in advocating for a position or against a position, so that we're that's just please be aware that this is happening, and my interest remains that we adopt these as board positions if they make sense. Please. We have a resolution, so this is also what we.
And we'll have to have more of a conversation
Oh,
about
yeah.
that
Oh, yeah.
when we're more prepared for it. Okay, I think, unless I'm missing something.
No, I think you're right.
Okay, I'm calling for adjournment.
You,
Thanks, everybody.
thank you.